What would you do if a stranger sent you a video of your husband on one knee, proposing to another woman on a beach, while you thought he was away on a business trip? Would you cry? Would you call him screaming? Would you fall apart right there at your desk? As I didn't. I typed one word. And then I waited. And what happened next changed everything. My name is Sarah. I'm 38 years old, a marketing director at a mid-sized firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I had been married to my husband Michael for 11 years. 11 years of shared meals, shared dogs, shared dreams, and a Thursday night ritual of Thai food and low-stakes arguments about what to watch on TV. We didn't have children. That had been a slow, quiet grief we had both eventually learned to carry in silence. But we had each other. Or at least that's what I believed. I thought I knew Michael completely. The way he slept with one arm thrown over his face. The way he always burned the first pancake on purpose, claiming it was a tradition. The small white lies every married couple tells each other. I already ate, traffic was bad, I'm fine. I thought that was the full catalog of his dishonesty. I was so wrong. Looking back now, I can trace the exact moment the first crack appeared. And it's almost embarrassing how clearly I can see it in hindsight. It was February, 7 months before everything collapsed. Michael started going to the gym at 6 in the morning. That sounds like nothing. People change their routines. Except Michael had never, not once in 11 years, been a morning person. He once said getting up before 8 was a form of violence. But suddenly, he was setting a 5:30 alarm with enthusiasm. He lost 14 pounds over 3 months. His shirts started fitting differently. He started buying new ones, slimmer cuts, nicer brands. He began wearing cologne on random Tuesdays when he had nowhere important to be. I noticed all of it. Of course I noticed. But I told myself a comfortable story. Midlife reset, a little self-improvement, maybe some vanity. Isn't that what women are always told? Don't be paranoid. Don't be controlling. Trust your husband. So I trusted him. I wish I had trusted myself instead. Then came the phone. Michael had always been relaxed about his phone. Left it on the counter, never flinched when I walked by while he was texting. Starting in March, the phone became an extension of his body. It went everywhere. To the bathroom. To the garage. Face down on the nightstand, always face down. I noticed the pattern long before I allowed myself to name it. One evening I reached across him to grab my water glass and his hand shot out and flipped the screen before I could even glance at it. The movement was reflexive, automatic. He laughed it off immediately. Work stuff, sensitive contracts. I laughed too. And we never mentioned it again. But something had shifted inside me. Something quiet and cold, like a stone dropping into still water, sending invisible ripples to the edges. Perhaps that was the moment I should have listened to the feeling. But we are so often trained to explain away what we know. The business trips became slightly more frequent. An extra one in April, another in June. Always with plausible explanations. A conference in Atlanta. A client situation in Miami. A supply chain issue that needed his personal attention. I verified nothing. I had built my entire self-image around being the kind of wife who didn't snoop, who didn't make scenes, who was reasonable. Looking back, that carefully constructed self-image nearly cost me everything. The video arrived on a Tuesday in September at 11:14 in the morning. I was at my desk eating a salad I wasn't hungry for. Reviewing a campaign proposal completely inside an ordinary day. My personal phone buzzed. Unknown number. No message. Just a video file 22 seconds long. I almost didn't open it. I assumed it was spam. Some part of me, the part that already knew, maybe hesitated. Then I opened it. The footage was shaky, shot from a distance but clear enough. A beach. White sand, calm blue water, somewhere warm. And Michael, my husband, in a white linen shirt I had never seen in our 11 years of marriage, down on one knee in front of a young woman with long blonde hair. She was laughing and crying at the same time, hands pressed over her mouth. He was holding up a ring box, looking up at her with an expression I had never once seen him direct at me. I watched it 3 times, then 4, then 5. He had told me he was in Columbus, a 3-day logistics conference. He had called me the night before and asked if I remembered to give the dogs their flea medication, while planning to propose to someone else. I sat very still at my desk for a long time. My salad sat untouched. The office noise continued around me. Keyboards clicking, a printer humming, someone laughing in the hallway. The perfectly ordinary world, proceeding completely without interruption. Then I opened my messages, found Michael's name, and typed exactly one word. Smile. I put the phone face down on my desk and went back to the campaign proposal. Within 1 hour, I had 77 missed calls. I didn't answer a single one. I let the phone buzz against the desk like a trapped insect, and I finished reading the proposal, and I sent 3 work emails, and at 12:45 I walked to the break room and poured myself a coffee I couldn't taste. My hands were steady. That surprised me more than anything. I had expected shaking tears, some physical evidence that my life had just folded in half. But there was nothing like that. Just a strange pressurized stillness, the kind of silence that comes right before a storm system moves in. By the time I drove home that evening, the calls had stopped. 4 text messages waited. The first said, "We need to talk." The second said, "Please just pick up." The third said, "It's not what it looks like," which struck me even in that raw moment as an almost insulting thing to say about a video of a man proposing to someone. The fourth said, "I love you. Please call me." I read all 4 sitting in my own driveway with the engine off, and I felt something clarify inside me. Not rage, not yet. Something colder. More useful. Something that felt remarkably like purpose. I went inside, fed the dogs, and opened my laptop. The first thing I did was make a list. Not an emotional list. Practical one. Assets. The house, jointly owned, purchased in 2019 for $487,000. Currently estimated at around $610,000. 2 cars. A joint savings account. My 401k. His pension plan. The investment portfolio we had built slowly, carefully over 8 years. I wrote it all down in a spreadsheet with the calm efficiency of someone doing inventory. Then I made a second list, evidence. The video saved to my phone, immediately airdropped to my laptop, and emailed to my personal backup address. The 4 text messages screenshotted. The details of the trip he had claimed: Columbus, the Marriott downtown, the Midwest Supply Chain Summit conference. That night, after the house went quiet, I Googled the conference. It didn't exist. There was no Midwest Supply Chain Summit in Columbus in September. I cross-checked 3 different sources. Nothing. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat at the kitchen table, and let myself feel it for exactly 20 minutes. The humiliation. The nausea of mentally replaying every business trip, every late text, every new shirt, every early morning. The specific, breathtaking realization that Michael had been planning to propose to someone else while still legally married to me, which meant he had been quietly engineering a future that required my erasure. I wasn't a wife he had fallen out of love with and was struggling to leave honestly. I was an obstacle. An item on a to-do list. 20 minutes. Then I closed that door and started thinking. If only he had known, in that moment of quiet confidence, what was already being built on the other side of the table. Here is what I knew about myself. I was not going to cry in a lawyer's office. I was not going to send a furious text at midnight. I was not going to call his mother or post anything on social media or show up wherever he was. All of those options had one thing in common: they were emotional, and emotional meant reactive, and reactive meant losing the only advantage I had. Michael didn't know what I knew or what I was doing, and I intended to keep it that way. The plan that formed over the next 2 hours was simple, logical, and ruthless in its patience. First, consult a family law attorney before Michael returned home. Not to file anything yet, just to understand the landscape. What did documented adultery mean legally in North Carolina? What records could I access? What should I absolutely not touch or say that could compromise my position later? Second, document everything and let a professional tell me what more I needed. Third, do not change my behavior. When Michael came home, I would be normal, calm, unbothered. I would let him believe his panic had worked. Fourth, protect the finances quietly, carefully, without a single wrong move. I closed the laptop at midnight. Michael texted one more time. "I'm coming home tomorrow. Please be there." I put the phone on charge, took the dogs upstairs, and slept better than I had in months. The attorney's name was Margaret Holloway. She came recommended by a colleague whose divorce 3 years earlier had been described with one word: surgical. I called her office at 8 in the morning and got a same-day cancellation appointment. Her office was on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown, Tasteful, calm. The kind of space designed to make chaos feel manageable. Margaret herself was in her early 50s, silver-haired, with the composed energy of someone who had heard every version of every story and remained completely unshockable. I liked her immediately. I told her everything in order. I showed her the video, the text messages, my 2 spreadsheets. She took notes without interrupting. When I finished, she looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "You haven't responded to him since the one-word text." "No," I said. She almost smiled. "Good. Keep it that way until we talk again." North Carolina, she explained, is an at-fault divorce state, one of the few remaining. Documented adultery was legally relevant, not just emotionally. It could affect asset division. It could expose Michael to what the state calls alienation of affection liability. She told me exactly what to document and how, and exactly what not to do. Don't access his phone or email without consent. Don't move money. Don't discuss the case on social media or with mutual friends. "Are you sure you want to proceed?" she asked. "Not with doubt, just professional duty." "I've never been more sure of anything," I said. And I meant every word. Michael came home that evening with a roller bag and a bouquet of grocery store flowers that made me feel something between pity and contempt. He looked terrible, pale, unshaven, the specific hollowed-out appearance of a man who had spent 24 hours terrified of his own choices. He said my name like a question. "Hi," I said. I was at the stove making pasta. The confusion on his face was almost worth the previous 24 hours. He had prepared for screaming, for tears, for cold silence. He hadn't prepared for pasta. We sat across from each other and he talked for a long time. The story came out in pieces, contradicting itself, rearranging itself, trying on different shapes. Her name was Cassie. He'd met her 18 months ago at an actual conference in Phoenix. It had started as nothing. Just happened. He hadn't meant to fall in love. The proposal had been impulsive. He was confused. He still loved me. He was so sorry. I listened. I asked calm, quiet questions that sounded like a wife trying to understand, but were actually a woman gathering testimony. How long? 18 months. Did she know about me? A pause. She knew I was married. Where were you? Destin, Florida. Her idea. She rented a beach house. I filed every answer in my mind. Then he said, "I ended it. When you sent that one word, I called her and ended it. I want to fix our marriage." I looked at him across 11 years of shared life and said, "Okay, I need some time to process. Let's just be calm this week." He exhaled with visible relief. What he couldn't possibly know was that while he had been on his flight home, I had already forwarded the video to Margaret. And Margaret had forwarded it to a private investigator she worked with regularly, a sharp, meticulous woman named Carol, who had already begun pulling records. Flight manifests. Hotel receipts paid on our joint credit card. Michael had been sloppy because he had never once imagined he would need to be careful. 3 days later, the first document arrived. A credit card statement showing 18 hotel charges across 7 cities over 12 months. Every single one on trips I had known about and believed in completely. The total came to $62,000. $62,000 charged partly to accounts that held our shared money. That was what his double life had cost. That was the moment I stopped calling it a marriage and started calling it a case. Margaret filed the initial separation papers on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after the video. Michael had no idea they were coming. I had been, as promised, calm, attentive enough to seem like a woman working through her pain privately, distant enough that he had started walking on eggshells. He had stopped going to the gym at 6. He had started coming home early. He had made dinner twice. He was performing the role of a reformed husband with the desperate energy of someone who knows his audience is not convinced. The process server reached him at his office at 10:15 in the morning. His assistant called me 12 minutes later. Michael was on his way home. He came through the door 40 minutes later with a face I had never seen before. Not remorse this time, something harder, something that had made a decision. "You filed," he said. "I did." Then, without telling me, I looked at him evenly. "You didn't tell me about Destin." He stood in the hallway for a long moment. Then his voice shifted. Quieter, more deliberate. A different register entirely. "Margaret Holloway is a pit bull, Sarah. This is going to be a war." I said, "Okay. He said, "You're going to blow up everything we built." And I said, "You built a parallel life on top of what we built. I'm just responding to the foundation you laid." That was when his phone rang. He stepped outside to answer it. When he came back in, he was steadier, which made me more alert, not less. "Cassie's father is a real estate attorney in Tampa," he said. "He's prepared to help her understand her options. Then she has texts, emails. She's prepared to submit them as evidence that the affair was mutual and sustained." I kept my voice level. "My attorney is familiar with the statute." He moved closer. "Sarah, I'm asking you to stop this. We can negotiate privately. But if you push this, her father will make sure it gets complicated." And there it was. The threat dressed up as advice. The word complicated designed to make me feel like the problem. "I appreciate you coming in person," I said. "Tells me a lot. Margaret will be in touch about scheduling." A pause. "I'd like you to leave my property now." He left that evening with a poorly packed bag and half his clothes still in the closet. His good watch on the dresser. The charger for his laptop still plugged in beside the bed. The dogs didn't seem to notice. I did. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. The deposition was scheduled for a Wednesday in November, 4 months after the video. The session was held in a neutral conference room downtown, the kind of room that smells of old paper and forced neutrality. Michael sat with his attorney Fowler, a man hired at Cassie's father Gerald Marsh's direction. Margaret sat next to me. Across from us, 4 months of careful, patient preparation. I had not seen Michael in 6 weeks. He looked older, or maybe just less assembled. He didn't look at me when I walked in. The deposition moved methodically. Margaret had prepared me so thoroughly that I felt less like a witness and more like an architect watching a building go up exactly as designed. She questioned Michael around what we already knew, so that his answers either confirmed the evidence or created contradictions on the record. He confirmed the $62,000 in credit card charges. He had no choice, they were fully documented, and attempted to characterize them as personal spending he had intended to repay. Margaret produced the statements with dates precisely matching the hotel bookings Carol had mapped. He confirmed there had been no conference in Columbus in September. He had been in Destin. He had told me Columbus. Yes, he acknowledged that. Then Margaret introduced the phone records. 18 months of cell tower data for Michael's phone. Not what was said, but where the phone had physically been. It placed him in 7 cities on 7 separate trips. All 7 matched hotel charges on the joint credit card. None of the 7 matched the destinations he had given me. Fowler's objections became more frequent. Michael's answers became shorter. The confident man who had stood in my hallway using the word realistic had been replaced by someone calculating in real time exactly how much he had underestimated the preparation on the other side of the table. But the real moment, the one Margaret had engineered with the patience of a chess player who sees 12 moves ahead, came in the final hour. Gerald Marsh, Cassie's father, had submitted a supporting declaration claiming that his daughter had been deceived by Michael, that Michael had represented himself as separated, imminently divorcing, with his wife's knowledge and tacit consent. It was designed to shift legal weight away from Cassie and onto Michael, reducing her culpability while increasing his. Margaret had predicted this move entirely. She introduced a single exhibit, a text message exchange between Michael and Cassie, dated 4 months into the affair. Cassie had written, "Does she actually know about us?" Michael had replied, "She suspects, but she's not going to do anything. You know how she is." And Cassie had replied, "Good. I just need to know we're protected." The room went very quiet. She had not been deceived. She had asked the question, received the answer, and used it to assess her own protection. The declaration her father had submitted, the declaration a Tampa real estate attorney had put his professional reputation behind, was contradicted entirely and precisely by his own daughter's text messages. Fowler asked for a recess. During the recess, I sat in the hallway with Margaret. "That was the declaration," I said. "That was the declaration," she agreed. They reviewed enough of the messages to build their narrative. We reviewed everything. When we returned to the table, Michael's eyes finally found mine. I held them for a moment. No anger. No satisfaction. Just steadiness. 11 years and 1 Wednesday morning in November. The case settled 5 weeks after the deposition. It was not the settlement Michael and Gerald Marsh had driven 3 hours to my porch to propose. Not private mediation on their terms. Not the quiet resolution designed to minimize inconvenience for the people who had caused the problem. It was something else entirely. The kind of outcome that happens when one side has spent 4 months building a case with precision and patience, and the other side has spent 4 months assuming the woman across the table would eventually fold. She didn't fold. I received the house, its full value, bought out against Michael's share of the joint investment portfolio, with an additional offset for the documented $62,000 in marital funds misappropriated for the affair. My 401k remained entirely mine. His pension, partially accumulated during the marriage, was divided, and my share was significant. The joint savings account was split with an adjustment for documented waste. The legal costs were allocated partially to Michael by the court's discretion, given the conduct documented in the proceedings. That allocation alone was a number that made Fowler visibly uncomfortable during the final review. Gerald Marsh's declaration, the one he had signed with his professional reputation, remained on the public record directly alongside his daughter's text message reading, "I just need to know we're protected." Records are public. I had not planned that. I had not wanted it specifically. I had simply pursued what was mine through legitimate means. If the record had consequences for others, those consequences were the natural result of choices they had made freely, with full knowledge over 18 months. What you set in motion tends to continue in motion. 3 months after the settlement, Michael called once. He said my name, that particular tone of a man who has rehearsed an opening and is uncertain about everything after it. I interrupted quietly before he could find his footing. "I wish you well, Michael," I said. "Please don't call again." I meant the first part. That surprised me even as I said it, the genuine absence of a wish for his suffering. He had caused enormous, deliberate damage. The law had responded proportionally, and I was done. Not performing done. Not strategically done. Genuinely, completely finished carrying the weight of what he had chosen. The first year after the settlement was the quietest of my adult life, in the best possible sense. I repainted the living room in February, a warm terracotta I had wanted for years that Michael had always vetoed in favor of something neutral, something safe, something that wouldn't commit. I painted it myself over a long weekend, badly at first and then with improving technique, and when I finished and stood back and looked at it in the afternoon light, I felt something close to pure, uncomplicated satisfaction. A small thing. A real thing. I planted a kitchen garden in the spring. Tomatoes that came in all at once and overwhelmed me. Basil I couldn't use fast enough. One ambitious row of bell peppers that mostly did what they wanted. I bought a wide armchair for the corner of the bedroom with a good lamp beside it, and spent entire Sunday mornings reading without once checking the time. That freedom, the permission to simply be still without managing anyone else's comfort, was newer than it should have been, and I didn't take it for granted. In March, I was offered a senior VP position. The kind of role I would have hesitated over before, questioned my readiness for, deferred on for another year out of some habitual caution I had never bothered to examine. I said yes without hesitation. The work was demanding and interesting in mine, in a way that felt genuinely different from before. I started seeing a therapist in January, Dr. Amara Collins, direct, thoughtful, and not at all interested in offering easy comfort. We talked about the marriage and the betrayal and the specific layered grief of discovering that a life you believed in had been quietly hollowed out from underneath. But we also talked, and this was the part one hadn't expected, about who I had been before the marriage. The choices I had made that were entirely mine. The self-image I had built around being reasonable, unbothered, trusting without verification. Not to assign blame where it didn't belong, but to understand the full architecture of how I had arrived here. It was the most honest conversation I'd had in years. By summer I was genuinely happy. Not performed, not curated, not the version of recovery you post about. The quiet, load-bearing kind that requires no documentation. Michael, I heard through peripheral channels, was living in a Raleigh rental on a significantly reduced budget following legal fees. He and Cassie were still together in the technical sense of that word, though no second engagement had been announced, and what I heard suggested the original shine had left the arrangement sometime around the deposition. Cassie had relocated to Atlanta. Her previous Tampa employment had ended under circumstances described as mutually uncomfortable. Her social media had gone quiet, then private, then largely dormant. Gerald Marsh had not emerged professionally enhanced from his involvement in the Charlotte proceedings. I did not seek any of this information out. I received it the way you receive weather reports for places you no longer live, with mild, dispassionate interest, and then you move on. On the 1-year anniversary of the settlement, I drove back to Asheville. The same small inn, the same porch, the same river running fast and cold below. I sat with a glass of wine and the sound of the water and the early November dark coming in over the mountains, and I thought about very little in particular. I was 40 years old. The terracotta walls were waiting at home. There was basil on the counter. The dogs needed their morning walk. I finished the wine, went inside, and slept without dreaming. And somewhere in the quiet of that ordinary evening, I thought about the woman who had opened a 22-second video at her desk on a Tuesday in September and gone very, very still. She had been terrified. She had been humiliated. She had been completely alone with it in the middle of an ordinary afternoon in an office full of people who had no idea. But she had picked up her phone. She had typed one word. And she had not flinched from a single thing that followed. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay quiet, stay focused, and let the truth do its job. If you are sitting somewhere right now carrying something this heavy, a betrayal, a situation that feels too big and too complicated to fight, I want you to hear this. You do not have to be loud to be powerful. You do not have to be reckless to be strong. You just have to be clear about what you know, careful about what you do next, and patient enough to let the preparation speak louder than the panic. That is the whole story. And I am so glad it is mine. If this story stayed with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment below, tell me which city you're watching from, and tell me the one word you would have typed. Subscribe if you're new here because there are more stories like this one coming. And as always, take care of yourself because you are worth taking care of.